All right, Henry, 75th episode,
Ravi,
bro.
why,
Cheers.
why are you so far? Where are you?
Uh, week 10
Uh,
quarantine.
Week 10 quarantine and 75th episode. That's a
Hmm.
milestone, man. That calls for a
Yeah,
celebration. Is
yeah.
that is that why we're drinking some Jameson?
I mean, do we really need an excuse?
Well, I guess on your case, no, but as a father of two, being at
You
home,
play
you
that
kind of
card.
you kind of do.
You play that card way too much.
Yo, that is my like secret card to have. But if you think it's too much, then I'm gonna keep it to myself for a bit. Yeah, man,
Cool, man.
75th episode.
Yeah, it's been cool to see because we had to change everything we're doing with the podcast and yeah, regular line of business when quarantine hit. It's been cool that we were able to pivot really quickly and get this virtual setup. We experimented with like the Instagram live streams, and now we're here to Zoom. But
Do you
yo,
still
not bad.
remember? Do you still
Sure.
remember that pivot, like from okay, when COVID-19 was just something that we're here. Like back then, it wasn't even called COVID-19. It was just the coronavirus. We haven't even given it a name. And remember that last uh, film date?
Hmm.
Remember what happened?
Yeah, man. We actually talked about like three times on the podcast, like different guests, because like it was such a weird moment. Like the Friday before the lockdown, when like everyone in the world was like, "What's going on? What's going on?" I think you sent an email to the guests we had coming up, right? What was it,
Yeah,
March March
so
15th?
basically it was like, okay, we have to make sure that our crew, right, our team feels safe, and also the five guests that comes on our podcast feel safe as well too, because
Hmm.
with our team plus the five guests that comes on, it's like literally 11, 12 people that we're going to be interacting with that, that Sunday. So I think we have to we made that decision, now looking back, it was a great decision because once that email went out and the response that came back, three of the five, one guest, came back from Spain, like not even like a week or like 8 days, 8, 9
Yeah,
days.
yeah.
Another one, she's like a hyper growth entrepreneur in Toronto, and she's like going through all these events, and she's like, you know what? I'm getting like flu-like symptoms. And then the third, his wife is a nurse, and he's like, you know what? I'm okay, but my wife, she's a nurse, and she's getting flu-like symptoms. So I think it was like an easy, maybe let's just call it in.
Hmm.
Better not have everybody gather up together. And I think looking back, I think we made the right choice.
Absolutely. I think we had to do what we had to do, and we made it the right call because the day of, after we canceled it, the day of the actual the day we canceled it was when the lockdown was called in Canada, in Ontario, and pretty much worldwide. So it was a good call on that part. But yeah, man, it's been a roller coaster since, right? Like trying to keep the podcast going, keep communicating with people, trying to find out new opportunities. And it's interesting that our sales as a service side picked up. That's really what I want to talk about in this episode. The
Yes.
fact that
Wow.
our hypothesis got proved through COVID, right? That at a certain growth level, like product-led teams, need help with sales, right? I mean, for the past year and a half, we talked like how many companies have we like sent proposals to and talked to about, hey, outsource your sales, bring on senior salespeople that know what they're doing. Let us help build teams for you. And I mean, tech companies back to us were saying, why would I outsource it? I barely trust my salespeople anyways. And now during COVID, during a lockdown, these same companies who would not like let go of their sales process, let an outsourced team come in, were coming back to us saying, hey, we need help running remotely and operating remotely. And I mean, we talk about this almost every day now about how the change and pivot's been towards the future of work, how this accelerated the entire process. COVID, the lockdown has pretty much like in the last 3 months, about 3 years worth of change has happened in certain sectors, certain
Yes.
industries.
I remember like
right?
us talking in the beginning, when the quarantine happened, is like we would talk, usually, before the quarantine, we see each other every day.
Mhm.
We're at the office, we're always talking, so we kind of know exactly what's happening. And when the quarantine happened, we were talking, not as much, it was less, but still very engaging. But each chat that we have, like let's say even like an hour, 2 hour, 3 hours gap, it would feel like it's been days, because the
Yeah.
amount of information that we're getting from talking to other people, the amount of information that we were starting to see, from the internet, right, on social media, is like things are like slowly coming together, and we're just like in the middle trying to dissect everything, like what is really going on, right?
Right.
Remember, like when
Yeah.
we started doing the podcast, we're like, hey, you know what, we're like, the quarantine is not going to stop us. How are we going
Yeah.
to do this remotely? And back when the quarantine happened, like we never really toyed with the idea with, let's do this like a remote a podcast, right? Because we were so keen on the quality, the 4K quality, on a nice setup, great lighting. And to get to a point where like we're recording this, we're like, wow, what a change. But dude, 30 episodes in,
Hmm.
the world has
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, talking about that, right? Like, one of the things that really interests me is comparing what's happening right now to the 1920s, the Spanish influenza, and the Great Depression.
Right.
We talk about those kind of parallels all the time, right? Like how the Depression era and in this, even the Spanish flu, what happened to the world, what the changes it made, kind of sparked a third industrial revolution, right? Where a new way of production, mass production, came to be, and how that drastically changed the work environment, industrialized nations, and like set pretty much how the world's been for the past century. And now, like, what I feel like, and this is what we talk about obviously a lot, is how the fourth wave of revolution has now been sparked and been accelerated through COVID-19, and kind of like the the shrinking of the economy, right? It's like a slingshot effect. I feel like it's breaking down the past barriers, it's breaking down past infrastructure, it's exposing the weakness that we have in our infrastructure and how we have set up our society, and it's showing cracks, and it's allowing us for to change and to adapt, right? And
Right. Like it's
and,
it's
and
it's
it,
like basically a breathing ground for innovation to
mhm.
happen. Right.
And the crazy thing is, it's not even that painful. I mean, we were talking about this earlier today about how, we're talking about like how many millions of jobs have been lost. Like Uber this week let go of what, 3,500 employees, 14% of its global workforce, the salary level
Right.
workforce, in a Zoom call, just let them go, just like that, and all those jobs evaporated. Andrew Yang came out and said that 15 million jobs have permanently been disappeared from the U.S. economy. Those are jobs that are never going to come back, and that's just the confirmed ones, right? So we're seeing a wipeout of the economy shrinking and all this, and yet we're not feeling any radical changes. There's no food shortages. There's no lack of goods being delivered. Amazon's still delivering to the door. There's no riots in the street, right? No one's fighting. There's no police state. There's no military involvement. Everything's pretty civil. And I think the question mark is that a telling time of our times, that being connected with the internet and how society is wired in has allowed us to be calm and informed? Or is it that we're still in an artificial kind of bubble where we haven't felt the full effects of the lockdown and COVID-19 and the drastic changes to the economy?
No, 1,000%. And this is like when we start talking about, like, with the people that we're talking to, they're basically like two extreme. The ones that are
Mhm.
like, you know what, it's the new norm, right? This is the new normal. Things are not going to go back to the way that it is, and it's going to be, the new Great Depression. But then you have the other people who are like, hey, you know what? We're not really feeling the pinch. Everything is still the way it is. Once we open up the economy again, everything is going to be great. But you know, we were talking about this just like earlier today and like
Mhm.
last week. Like, what is going on with the stock market,
Yeah.
right? When there's massive layoffs and there's
Mhm.
so much negativity on the news, like this pandemic is across, right? Not just a country, but the entire globe, right? Many countries, many continents. And I think there was like a paper that I read on the Financial Times, and it's like the central bank of the U.S. went from $4 trillion of debt to 6.5 trillion by mid-April, and they're projecting to be like 9 trillion by the end of this year. And this is them sending a stimulus of almost $1 million per second into the economy. 1 million. I mean, like, what does that mean? I mean, have we lived in times that, you know, the U.S. government had injected such large amount of money into the market?
Do you know how they're injecting it? Are they doing like direct stock buybacks? Or like what's the paper trail there?
I don't know exactly like the mechanism for them to inject the 1 million. But they are doing, you know, selling their bonds against like private debt, right? Like their own bond, their own security against private debt, private
So
and public
governments
debt.
are buying these bonds, these private bonds.
Well, no, they're issuing their bonds, right, into the market. I don't know how, like, you know, I haven't been in touch with the stock market, but when I was just, you know, trying to follow, like, why are stock, like, you know, the SP 500, you know, gaining that traction after it dipped mid-March back to like not near high, like before quarantine, but like fairly close.
Yeah. And like, that's like the biggest problem, the biggest problem we have right now is our distrust in the establishment. People don't believe in our infrastructure and the way that we're structured right now, that like governments are helping them at the way that they want to. I mean, Canada, we've been blessed here. Like our government is doing actually really well. CERB and money just got to people pretty quickly, right? I mean, there's still a lot of improvements you've made, but Canada's been pretty responsive. Trudeau's done well, Ford has done well, the municipalities have done pretty well, right? Considering how novel the situation is for everybody. But, you know, like, but especially in the United States, when you're talking about the stock buyback, right? Is it, I mean, how prudent is that, right? Like putting money into publicly traded companies, and like bouncing up the stock market and keeping these companies alive, it seems so artificial, right?
It is.
Isn't this a time for radical change? I mean, for radical change to be approached, I think like radical change is of course disruptive and like there's major risk to it. But imagine if that kind of money can be given directly to the people, right? If you instead of it's that much money, even like a portion of it. I think like is Trump finally started giving a stimulus package, like stimulus checks, right, from the White House to people, like kind of like the CERB. But I don't know, like I think this is like a perfect time for like universal basic income to be tested out.
It's funny you say that because I was listening to Joe Rogan and one of his podcasts, and he was mentioning like I didn't see the tweet, but basically Trump tweeted, "If I'm not your president, do you still want my check?" Like I'm signing this check on this UBI, but if I'm not your president, do you still want my check? And it was like,
did you hear that Trump there's a hold off on the checks being printed out and delivered to people because Trump insisted that his signature be on each and every one of them.
Yeah, right? That's crazy, man. Like I heard that too.
Like as like stupid as it might seem, as like, oh, you know, why would they do it? Like as a political move, it's actually brilliant. Think about it. Like how many millions of people are gonna get a check written by Donald J. Trump, like with the signature on it, saying like, here you go, you know, we're gonna take care of you.
So I mean, but what was the delay though? Like that's what I don't understand. Like what was the delay? Like
so the checks are ready to go.
Check.
No, he's not, obviously, but like, I guess he's had to get they had to be an approval process, or he stopped them from doing that and made sure that framework, where that thing was added to the checks.
Wow, I didn't know that. I knew like he signed the checks, like it's his signature. I just didn't know, like, you know, he put a hold on it. Like, hey, you know what? I want to make sure that it's my signature go on those checks.
Like, you know how much I love history, and like this thing reminds me of like when Augustus Caesar, right, the first Roman emperor, came to power, right? He had no real power. Like Julius Caesar just gave him his fortune, and like he gave his money. He was his uncle. He was a direct relative, and he had nothing. But what he did do was he went to all these soldiers who didn't get paid, right, by the previous administration, that didn't really like him, and paid the salaries that the government didn't pay. Right?
That paid the salary that, okay.
He paid the salaries of soldiers that didn't get their due paychecks from the
And
government.
where did he get all the money?
It was from when Julius Caesar got killed. In his will, he left everything he gained to his nephew that he barely knew, because he had no direct descendants. So this guy, who's super smart, like Caesar liked him.
That's brilliant.
He was just like a bookworm. Like he was like legit like a nerdy like teenager when Caesar met him, but liked his mind so much that Caesar, who like was one of the most like notorious generals in history, left his entire fortune to this guy. And when he came of age, one of the first thing he did after he came from school was pay the salaries of soldiers who wasn't get paid by the government. And he lost a lot of money, but he got undying support of the people.
That's amazing.
Right? Like that's the thing thing about Trump is that even though he does all these obnoxious things, he knows his base. And imagine the millions of like the poor people, especially in Central America, right, who are going to get these checks from Donald J. Trump. Yeah, absolutely. They're going to be like, yo, this is a leader who took care of us during this time. And it's America. Mm-hmm. They don't have a culture of being taken care of. They don't really have healthcare to be taken care of, right? Like right. We at least are used to like a nanny state where like the government, socialized healthcare, right? Like more universal support systems. Like we're used to that. We're used to the idea of taking care of ourselves, our neighbors, right? Like if you're a Canadian citizen, you're almost like one of one family. We're ready to sacrifice and give part of our income, our taxes to go to take care of everybody else. That makes sense to us. But America, it's more independent, and having that culture, right? Getting literally a stimulus check with the name of your president on it, bro. Like he's almost sure in to get reelected.
I have to really think about this one. Like I never really thought about it like that, but I mean, strategically, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, as a political strategy, I mean, it's genius.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Trump is so good at branding. Like that's what he does. He just puts his name against things and absorbs part of that brand identity onto him.
Right. I mean, he's an entertainer, right? I mean, why are we talking about Donald J. Trump?
Yeah, I mean, with Corona and the stimulus package and all that kind of stuff, we're talking about like the geopolitics of everything. I think is worrisome, right? Like the main thing is that anytime there's been a depression, even a recession, it's almost always been a war.
Yeah.
Right. Someone somewhere sparked something because war pays and allows for like it's a more aggressive control by the ruling powers. There's a whole bunch of side effects that happen from a war, right? And especially when an economy is doing badly, that sparks that sparks people to move forward. And like end of the day, like for leaders who are under pressure to like have to move things forward and to keep things flowing, I think what do you think? Like, do you think that it could be a potential for like an actual large scale war?
Like a large scale war that we know what war is, probably not. Because real war right now isn't really fought with guns and soldiers, with tanks or anything like that. And I don't want to speculate, but things are happening and they're happening really fast, and we don't really have a lot of information. But right now it seems like, we're like where information is so readily available and accessible. The real question is like, how do I know that that information that I'm getting or the data that I'm getting is real, is correct?
Yeah.
Right. With social media, there's such a large influence. Everybody connected. Everything that you want, it's at the tip of your finger. So, but like, how do we know that the information that we're getting is accurate, right? So even right now, to be very honest with you, like ever since the quarantine happened in the beginning, I was watching the news maybe like, you know, the first couple of days at your place, right? Like every time Trudeau came up and he was like talking about, you know, what's happening with shutdown, lockdowns, and things like that. But after that, I'm just like, hey, you know what? Like maybe I should just turn off the TV and not really, you know, look at the news because every day it's the same. It's the same,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Um, I actually have been following news that much. Like I tune in here and
Have
there.
not.
I have not
Yeah,
like
exactly.
been following too much because like I do feel like you're gonna get lost in like keeping up with everything.
Hmm.
And I'm weird enough, like I kind of outsource that to my wife, because like she's really good at keeping up to date with everything and like reading all from multiple sources and like fact checking things. So she gives me like the daily briefing, like of like what's like anything major's up. Me, I like looking for like more long term pattern shifts, right? And things that like fluctuate, that you can see how like the economy is moving or politics is moving toward a certain direction, or things are
Hmm.
happening. Like I like those directional shifts. And one of the things we of course follow a lot is like the future of work and how the whole thing is shifting the economy and how people are working, right? So like one of the things like I think about a lot is like like when like Henry Ford came up with the assembly line, the modern day
Hmm.
assembly line. He was pretty much getting people to do microtasks, right? Like microtasking, like how we call the gig economy, right? So
Right.
rather than, hey, build out this entire car from stack, you're be a trained engineer, you train fully, and like, a team of people build one entire car one time. Here's the assembly line. You learn this one skill and just do that, dozens of times a day. Just keep putting the screw into this socket and move it along, this assembly line movement, right? So it's atomizing of the previous firm, right? Like, they break down the processes of what used to happen and sequence it so that it's like what used to be a vertical play, have to assemble a car from end to scratch, putting everything together with a team of four or a team of a small team, to be breaking down a horizontal. So one person does multiple cars at one level,
Hmm.
team installs the access, another team installs the doors, another team installs the lights, right? And so forth and so forth, till you get a complete car and put it through that. And that's kind of what's happening right now with the workforce. That's what we're seeing, right? Like the gig economy is kind of at the forefront of that, is breaking down these like high level tasks and making like into like a micro play. And what I'm really interested in is like, how do we do that for like high level jobs, high level that require high level skill sets that'll pay a higher level amount. How do we get to the point where we wake up in the morning and like our phone will have a bunch of jobs for us that we can decline or take on, but our projects that'll pay for us, like they'll pay for our lifestyle, but like good enough, like more than a living wage. How do we gigify $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 level paying jobs or
Right.
skill sets, right?
Right. I mean, like that's the most important, like, like interesting things, right? Like,
Mhm.
especially when we're talking about a complex problem, how do you break it down and atomize it? Like, focus on the person that's good at that skill set with that skill set, obviously, right? And all you have to do is, do that one task or these set of tasks, and you know that it actually adds on to like a larger more complex problem that other people are coming together to build and solve. Just like you're
Mhm.
building like a puzzle piece, right? Like talking about efficiency, I think right now we're like the forefront of it. Like we're remote working. Like before, we needed an office because we needed to see each other, communicate, go to meetings. But right now, we're pretty comfortable doing Zoom calls, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I still like the, in person, face to face interaction, but when everybody is working from home and they're making it work, some better than others, especially people with family, it's harder. But I mean, it's something that over the last 10 weeks, we have gotten used to, right? It's almost like
Yeah.
validating that idea. And with the tech companies, they're saying that like when quarantine is done, when lockdown is canceled, you guys still have the choice to work from home.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Like, would you continue work from home? Do you want us to go back to huddle or another office space? What would you like?
Honestly, I like the flexibility that I'm not in the office, right? But I need a change of environment, to be very
Yeah.
honest with you. I'm like kind of cooped in, right? Like, but maybe when summer comes, work outside, work outdoor,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'm looking
We were
forward to
talking
that.
about it before COVID-19, right? Like during the winter, especially when summer hits, we're gonna work in a park. What's stopping
Yeah.
us to do so, right?
Yeah.
All we need is our computer, internet connection that we can tether from our phone, our notebook, and that's basically it, right?
Absolutely. It's so weird because now I'm like super conscious of the fact that I'm glowing. I don't know why Zoom is like picking that up, the white in the into black background,
Is
but
the white shirt tab menu?
tab menu, man.
Tab menu, gotta represent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had to represent this on our 75th episode. Shout out to those
Yes.
guys. I mean, one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest shocks for us when COVID and the lockdown hit was tab menu, right? Because like tab menu we've been focusing on for what the better part of this year,
Yeah.
and we were ready to put it into market. We just came from the RC show. We had all these POs, we had all this traction to move forward with tab menu, and we were super excited for all these partnerships we were signing. And COVID kind of dried it all up. The entire restaurant industry has been radically shifted. But one of the things that I really appreciate working with the tab menu team is how quickly they have adapted and shifted their technology to help continue servicing the restaurant industry, and how the industry has responded back, right? People are now coming and searching for us and finding us and figuring out what we can do for them. But man, like one of the things I appreciate is like how much you've been working with the team directly, the QA tester. You're like a born QA tester, right? Picking apart things,
It's both a
right?
blessing and blessing and a curse.
Like when we first started talking, you start saying like how like like how little you knew about tech and getting into it. But the weirdest thing is how quickly you stepped into the QA role. Anything, any client we're talking to, any software we're looking into, any potential thing we're looking cool, you're just like breaking them apart and seeing what are the breaking points, what do they solve, what could they do better, and you're really good at that. How's the development of that skill been?
I think that skill I've been developing for like, the better part of my life because honestly, like you were saying, like tech is a new environment for me, right? Like, you know,
Mhm.
uh, getting into it, understanding it, and I'm not like a big fan of technology. A couple years ago, if you tell me, hey, you know what, like there's this new app, there's this new software, I'll be the laggard. I'll be the last person to check it out until I have people in my circle that's using it. Somebody telling me there's actually a use case for it. But the idea of like building a business, like QAing, understanding a business model. I mean, those are a set of skills that you acquire through experience. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I was working at a mechanical and electrical engineering company right after graduation. Like that time, I was an engineer, right? And it's because that feeling that I wasn't an engineer and like the imposter syndrome is like whenever you go to
Mm.
meeting, it's like I shouldn't be here because everybody is like architects, engineers, contractors. I have no idea what they're talking about. That's what really fueled me. For me, like when I don't understand something, I get very uncomfortable because I don't think I should even be in the room.
Yeah.
You know that feeling, right? And that's what really motivated me to be like, hey, you know what? I need to understand this industry. I need to play a part, and I want to provide value. And that's the main motivation.
No, that's great, man. Like I really appreciate working with you on that because I don't have those same kind of that same kind of response. I am continuously put myself in situations where I have no idea what's going on, right? And I honestly I thrive off it. I love being in a situation where I don't know what's going on and being able to like find nuances or find ways to connect on things I already do know to kind of bridge the gap. it puts me off. So I mean, it's so interesting, like the similarities that our trajectory of our life had, and also like how similar in our thinking we become. Because and me too, I ended up working at an engineering company, like a complete engineering company where literally everyone in the office was an engineer. I was an only non-academically trained engineer, but my title was um, sales engineer, which I
Sales
found to
engineer.
be so fucking cool, right? To be called a sales engineer. My job was to construct engineered sales channels. I didn't even know what that title was until like I got the job. And when I was interviewing for the job, I didn't even know that was the title I was going to get. But I was trusted in the engineering environment. We're supposed to sell engineering, like engineers to facility managers. And funny thing is, like, this is a parallel between me and you, right? Like, you went out of your way to learn the specs. Like, when I talk to you, you talk about like room plans and like architectural diagrams, and you learn the hell out of the industry where you can talk to an architect, you can talk to an engineer at their level about, hey, this is how things happen, right? I spent a year in that company, and I had no idea about any of that kind of stuff. But I could speak to it. I knew enough and how to talk to people that I could do my job. I could sell it without having to understand what it was, the actual product, how it worked, or like the process behind it.
Right, because you have a full engineering team behind that can support you if they have
Yeah,
any
if needed.
questions. But once you're in the PO, then that's golden. Once you make the sales, you're good.
Honestly, I never needed to rely on an engineering team to answer engineering questions because I never sold the product. I sold the person, you know? Even when I'm selling to when I'm selling to like B2B for that engineering company, like I would find a facility manager or a CEO of like of an industrial warehouse, or like we're selling commercial and industrial lighting, right? That's what I was hired to do. Pretty much the CEO of this engineering company went to China, got super drunk, and on his credit card ordered like $500,000 worth of like these LED lights. He came back, it got shipped to him. Like it was a dumb bet he made. Like on a whim, he literally made a $500,000 supply, like order. And then like a month, 2 months later goes by, he gets the delivery. He's like, oh shit, now I have to actually sell this. So he hires me to come and sell it for him. So I came in as a liquidator. He's like, you know what? This is what we have. Figure out a way to sell this. And if you can move this, we'll create a department and you can buy and sell whatever the hell you want. And I'm
Hey,
like, this is an amazing opportunity, but I have no idea how to sell commercial lighting. I don't know how lighting even works. I don't even know how like commercial and industrial spaces work. But I ended up finding out the people who work in these environments, what was the user persona, how do they talk, what kind of words do they use, well, where do they congregate, I became a member of BOMA. I became like a member of like BOMA is a builders and property managers association. There's a Canada level, there's an Ontario level. I went to them, like learned what they were saying, who they're meeting with, what like all these bigger name property management companies were talking about, and then use the stuff they were talking about and go and sell to medium level players. And I still had
right.
no idea what was happening. I just, you know what I mean? I just figured out what their interests were, what the people's motivations were. And that's what I love about sales. I truly love about sales is that if you're good at people, if you understand how people work and motivate and how they operate, and you can become a person that alleviates problems for them, right? They'll buy whatever you're selling.
Right.
Right?
Right. I mean, we talked about this, right? Like the
Mhm.
consumers, like when they're buying something, let's say, you go to a hardware store, ask them like, hey, what are you really buying? Like that 1/4 inch drill. It's not really the 1/4 inch drill that they're buying. They're paying money to create a 1/4 inch hole, right?
Yeah.
It's like the result, like what value can you bring me? Like, let's say if I'm selling something for you, all I need to know
Yeah.
is I have a product, please and go sell this. I don't care how you do it. I just want to get paid for the product that I'm selling, right? So what do you think about like the new age, like the future of sales is going to be? Like how is that going to be
We're
different,
we're
especially,
testing this.
after quarantine?
Yeah, I mean, we're testing this new model, right? How we can pretty much operate a call center virtually, remotely, at like a fraction of the cost that it took, like even just 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And this idea of virtual and remote environments, the decreased cost of not having to have the overhead of like housing people, of giving them equipment and operating them, just being able to pay the cost of SaaS tools to enable remote distributed team to work from anywhere, I think is really interesting, because I don't think the future of sales is you put together 10 people, 20 people into a room and they brainstorm and hit different regions.
Mm-hmm.
I think like if you want to like sell in Washington State or in Colombia or in Spain, you can hire remote salespeople in those regions who are part of that culture, who already have connections to that culture, who may have already sold different things in that region, and almost contract them out, right? And be like, because you don't need them to come to the office. You don't need them. You're used to and running remotely and being a distributed team, that you can onboard them and hire them virtually and remotely across across the distance, and they can operate in a region and with language understanding that you would never be able to hire for in a traditional environment, right? So I'm really interested in this breakdown of the firm where like people are more transient in a company, right? Where just like you nowadays you don't really say hire out a marketing team, a full marketing team in-house. You can contract a marketing team while you're growing up and getting settled, situated. You can break apart different parts of your company. IT resources being a thing, software resources being a thing. But how do you string together, a company held by different players? I think early on I talked about Colony.io, one of my favorite decentralization projects, right, from the blockchain movement. Colony.io was like, how do we get independent players?
Calling.io?
Colony.
Oh, Colony. Okay, I was thinking, I'm like, what's calling.io? Okay, Colony.
Right. So how do you string together, all these players in a microtask kind of level, right? Like atomize the firm. So if a marketing firm that's just pure marketing and they can do it at a high level because they have 9 or 10 of these clients who pay their bills, and they can just focus just purely on marketing and they can be the best marketers possible, they're doing that. Well, why does a company need to be a full company and just outsource marketing or outsource part of the thing? Why can't you just be a lean team, building out a product or service, make sure the product or service is really good, and you pretty much contract out the remainder? Like how do you string together what is traditionally part of one company in a vertical format into a horizontal format? We're a product company that we build multiple products. We're a sales company that sells multiple things. We're a marketing company that markets different companies and different products, right? So rather than labels or different brands, the label owner or the brand owner can be the end client, but they can transact through this layer of independent players all strung together to form what was formerly an in-house company.
Right. So I mean, like, it's the agency model, right? Like where a lot of these agency that plays, a skill set, let's say from your HR, there are agencies that will just take care of your HR. There's agency for marketing that would just take care of your marketing. So you don't need the in-house marketing. I think the real idea here is like, how do we make this cohesive across the board? That you built this team out of agency and they're really functioning at its highest and most optimal level, where, as a company from the outer side, you're just looking at this like, wow, this is a well-oiled machine. But internally, it's like different companies, which are agency that are running these like different departments. I think that's like the most important, like the interesting thing, to see in the next couple of years, because anybody that can do that right can really, captivate the entire market. If you think about it. Why do you need real estate to house, your HR team, your sales team, your marketing team? Guys can work remotely. They need is maybe the computer, a cell phone, and that's about it. An internet connection.
Yeah, and they take care of their own costs of living, the own cost of operating, and where they work out of. It's an interesting model, right? It brings down the cost of operating. So it allows a lot more ideas, a lot more testability, and a lot less friction to deploy ideas.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I
Right?
mean, that's why Jeff Bezos, he made like, you know, that famous two pizza rule. So they break down their team into a very small team where if they need to stay late, you can feed them with two pizza. And that's nimble and that's a great team.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. With two pizza roll.
Two pizza rule. That's just us.
Yeah.
One pizza each.
But talking about that, man, like, what do you think's gonna happen after quarantine? Like, do you think things are gonna go back to normal? We talked about behavior. You know, like it takes what, 6 weeks to form and build a habit. People have gotten used to being afraid of people and large
Yeah.
groups and going out and doing regular things, right? Like, what do you think is the long-term effect on behavior?
I don't know. To be very honest with you, like subconsciously, I was downtown, you know, last week, and I was just in a residential neighborhood. A lady was coming towards me. I didn't really think. I just walked down the road to avoid her, and then she kind of avoided me, and we just went off with our, you know, our business. It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know. It's gonna be weird, man. Like you're going out, you're seeing your neighbor, but like you're keeping the 2 meter distance. It's like, because I don't know where you've been and you don't know where I've been, right? Like, I mean, we're
Yeah,
young and strong, but I mean, everybody has, or, you know, people that are vulnerable around them in their lives, and you never know. I don't know.
yeah,
That's a real hard question to answer.
absolutely.
What do you think?
Like, no, absolutely. Like, you know, I mean, I just moved into a new home like a week before quarantine hit. I just met my neighbors, like two of my neighbors.
Oh, both of
That
them from both sides?
so I met the one on one side, the other side, and the guy next to him. Right, there were we had some good weather on the weekend. Everybody in the neighborhood came out in the backyards. We don't have fences in the backyard yet. The brand new house, and we're all looking around each other and talking, and we're all kind of meeting each other, like, hey, it's waving and stuff. But like nobody's approaching each other. There's no handshakes. There's no exchange or anything. Everyone's kind of staying apart, like at least like a good like 10 feet. Everyone's in their own yard, right? They're trying
Hmm.
to talk and communicate. And the strangest of it all didn't even hit. Everyone just kind of like, yeah, this is the new normal,
Yeah,
right?
but okay, let me ask you, if somebody were to approach you, right, and try to shake your hand as they come towards you, like what would you do? Would you just back
I would,
away, or like, hey,
I
no,
would probably back away.
you would, eh?
Wouldn't
I
you?
don't know. I would now 100%, but I mean like I've seen people that are still very close to, you know, everybody that's around them. I've seen handshake.
You
So
know
it's
what?
like the
I think if I saw somebody that I know and they shook my hand, want to shake my hand, I wouldn't be able to walk away.
mm,
I would naturally go for it, and I wouldn't fight it too hard because it's super rude if someone like comes to shake your hand or something. You can't just be like this, right?
I mean that's a good point. I don't know. I don't know. So it's like business interactions now. What do you think that's going to be like? Like even if you're meeting with a client, let's say for example, are you going to be in
No,
a room and are you going to be
this.
distance?
I think it's gonna be this,
Yeah,
man. I don't think anyone's gonna
that's
be
it.
meeting much in person anymore.
I
This
mean,
is so easy. Like, how many people have we had a chance with to talk with? How many video conferences have we had? Like, everyone's down for a video call. Everyone's down to have their camera on and just talk to people, right, face to face through this. They're more available because we're not trying to meet with them face to face. Their time slots, they're booked in, and since we're booked in, they're down to communicate more, like at a deeper level. Like, people are more accessible like this. So I wouldn't actually want to go to a physical, like a face-to-face sales meeting. Maybe
interesting.
unless you're closing a deal, or else, unless like it's a very like significant milestone, or like it's a good deal, right? Like you know what I mean? Like, I think the cost of like trying to meet is too high. I think it's changed now radically because people, such a wide scale network of people have gotten used to this, that trying to go back that old curve is expensive. It's a waste of
Yeah,
time
it's
and
true. I mean,
resources.
like if you're using technology, like, you know, Zoom calls, conference calls, virtual calls, maybe you can do 6 to 8 a day, whereas like in person you can only do 2 because they're traveling, you know, not to mention the traffic going to, you know, Toronto, within Toronto. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but I just don't know, like, you know, how it's gonna be like, you know, when the lockdown is canceled and quarantine is gone.
Hmm.
Right? Meeting is just going to be, hey, make an appointment, and it's just going to be a Zoom or a Google chat. I
I
mean, like,
think
would it be awkward to ask to meet in person now?
I think so. I mean, I think you're gonna be asking a lot of somebody to be like, you know, take time out of my day to meet you at this one physical location or come to someone's office. If we go to someone's, of course, we one thing, but it's also the idea of a stranger coming and meeting you now, or like, you know, an unnecessary contact. You're also like you said, weighing in the idea of like somebody coming into contact with you. You know, I think that ROI is being constantly played out with people moving forward. It's like, is this going to be worth me, you know, risking a meeting? You know, there's only so much risk I could take in a day. Going to the grocery store,
So
going to so many
risky.
places is now a risk now, right? Because it's a risk of contagion, not just for me, but also like people who are vulnerable around me. That like people are gonna start thinking, it's like, hey, you know, like this, it's not really worth it. Like, why don't we just have a Zoom call? Like, this is frictionless. We can get everything done. I can see you face to face. I can see who you are, right? Why would we need to meet face to face unless it's a significant thing? Unless you have a previous relationship or you are closing something significant, right?
Yeah, no, that you're 100% right on that. So that's why I feel like, you know, like moving forward, things like restaurant tech, you know, social tech, even health tech, right, is going to be the future. Like, look at,
Mm.
you know, during COVID-19 with the lockdown, you know, telemedicine has blown up like massively. For example, one of our clients, like the Adjecare, they provide a virtual care platform where I think is going to be the future. Like, why would you need to go to, you know, meet a health provider when you can do it over a video chat?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're super excited to be working with Advocare. We still haven't technically announced it on social media or anywhere. So if we haven't, by the time this comes out, this is our announcement. We're now working with Advocare.
This is the official launch.
This is the official launch. But yeah, I mean, it's been super rewarding, right? Like our focus on Medicare technologies is such a weird like opportunity for us. It's a weird pivot because up there before COVID-19, we had so many healthcare tech companies we were in contact with, but didn't touch them as a potential client because like medtech sales is such a long, well, it was such a long like sales cycle previous to COVID-19. COVID-19 has completely radically transformed the entire industry, opened up rapid modernization and rapid adoption of new tools into an archaic and into an industry full of archaic old tools and processes. You know, just like e-commerce has experienced 3 years worth of growth in 3 months. Like virtual care, medical technologies has experienced the same kind of things where things are now moving a lot faster. Right? We're literally seeing turnaround times of customers and clients closing deals within days.
Yeah,
Right? Whereas
especially
before
like
it would have taken
enterprise
months.
client, where it normally takes like, you know, weeks and weeks and weeks of approval, of proposal. Now you see it close within a week to 2 weeks time, right?
Yeah,
Unheard of, unheard of. I
yeah.
mean, like, I think right now it's a perfect time to kind of, I mean, that was already the future, but that like COVID-19 just was a catalyst of that, right? Because we already know with technology, you can be so much more efficient and you can do so much more, right?
Yeah.
So with the, let's say with Adjecare is like, if you want to see a healthcare provider, your physician, you know, any type of like health provider, you can make an appointment. That's going to be like, you know, 30 minutes, where before you would have to travel, sit in the waiting room, get the appointment through, and half of the year is already gone.
Hmm.
Right now, maybe it's like literally 30 minutes. when you're up, you wait in the waiting room for a couple minutes before your provider comes on, do the consultation or the assessment, and you're off with their day.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm really interested in seeing is a radical change in the industry of how we treat healthcare. Right now, like healthcare is seen as, it's something that's very reactive. Something happens to you, and then you get medicine. Something happens to you, then you get some kind of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's always been reactive.
Very reactive.
Very little proactive movement. And what technology really allows is now the proactive treatment of ailments, right? Through data analysis and just access.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, wearables, like you can, an Apple Watch, $300, $400, $500, and it gives you all the data that you need about yourself.
Yeah, but like what we're like really interesting is like sharing that with the healthcare professional, or getting very high level like results back, right? Like already Apple Watches can predict strokes and heart attacks 15 minutes before they happen. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So they claim. And what happens when that gets paired? That gets even better. With analytics readings gets better. They understand your baselines. They understand what the deviances from normal looks like, and shares that with a healthcare professional or a healthcare network that can better treat you or give you feedback systems on what's working with what's not working for you. Like what happens when you have holistic understanding from a dietitian about what your diet is, from your eye doctor about how your eyes look like, with your fingertips being able to touch point and get from a sleep doctor what my sleep looks like. You have these devices that can collect all these analytics tools from you, sending it out to professionals who now cost a fraction of the cost. Look at the cost healthcare providers used to have. They used to have a clinic that they had to physically have to pay for the real estate for, have an admin staff to run that clinic, and generally maybe 3 or 4 doctors might operate on that, right? And even for
tons of overhead. Yeah.
Psychiatrists have the same thing. Midwives are the same thing. There's so much overhead costs with physical locations. And one of the things we're seeing in the aftercare and the virtual care space is now the launch of virtual care, clinics, virtual platforms, right? Where someone can be literally sitting at home, like the doctor, the professional, the doctor, the midwife, the psychiatrist, a counselor, right? They can be sitting at home, a dietitian, and have conversations like this with you over a secure platform and be able to provide you with constant feedback and tools. But how do we add another layer of that? A data layer where the data that's already being collected by devices gets shared with them in real time. So they're not just oh, doctor, I feel bad. Look, this is how I feel. And the doctor's like, oh, what are your symptoms? What is your temperature? Asking you and trying to diagnose you. No, you're getting, imagine the healthcare as a SaaS model, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a service model, where you're paying monthly, or it's part of your monthly touch points you have, where all your data gets shipped out to a bunch of specialists or a bunch of treatments, or one clinic or something that you're part of, right? That gives you a more holistic feedback on your health. What's the baseline for back issues? What's your baseline in your heart rate? What's your diet's been? How's your sleep patterns been? And it gives you direct feedback, right? I think that is the future that we're moving into. It's more personalized, customized products and services. And
for sure,
the ability of working in these frictionless environments are going to allow to do that. Yeah, and I think that's what I hope that the healthcare industry is moving towards.
No, I totally agree with you, right? With the amount of data that we can collect, and we can display it to a dashboard, right? That gives you like a physical, a snapshot of how you're doing. Okay, you're not feeling well, no problem. Let's check what's been happening to your body for the last 15 days, for the last 30 days, right? Mm-hmm. For us, if a doctor asks you when did you start feeling this pain? You know what? My best guess is 2 days ago, but maybe the symptom already started a week ago, and you just didn't feel it, or you just didn't, you weren't aware of it. But with data, that's tracking through wearables, all that data is being stored. It could be analyzed, and it could predict patterns. I think you're right. That's going to be the future, and that's going to, greatly, solve a lot of issues that we're facing with healthcare right now.
Yeah. So we went, I think, way over the hour.
Oh, have we already?
Yeah, I think we have. I think we're about an hour in, more than an hour in. You want to keep going, or you want to call this?
Let's do it.
Let's keep going. I like this. I'm gonna get a refill. Give me a sec.
That's why you got to put the bottle next to you.
Yeah, man. I didn't want to because just this reason. But how's May 2-4 weekend, the COVID version, been for you, man?
You know what? I was up in Bobcaygeon, doing a bit of work, but overall, it's nice. I think I heard some fireworks earlier.
Yeah, that's strange, right? Like I heard a few fireworks, but during this time, Victoria Day long weekend, May 2-4 weekend, maybe fireworks everywhere.
Right?
You would hear the hell out of it. It'd be annoying actually, because like people be putting off fireworks all the time.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if like they're gonna be police going to where people are, doing the fireworks and giving them a ticket.
It's probably in their backyards, people just launching one or two.
Oh no, yesterday when I was driving back to the city, I saw like a full blown like fireworks show as I was passing Pickering on 401.
Jeez.
Yeah, man.
Someone really likes fireworks.
Somebody with money.
Yeah.
That's basically what you're doing, burning money.
Yeah, man. But honestly, this made me realize like how much I miss like cottage. How much I miss scenery. Like, getting out of the scenery. Like we've been stuck in the same kind of four-walled environment for the last 10 weeks. We've been blessed because we're busy. There's a lot of people are sitting around just trying to figure out what to do or waiting around to see what's going to happen. We've been blessed because we're busy or moving forward and like we lose track of things. But there are obviously times when you look around, you're like, damn, man, like, you've been in the same grind. It's hard to stay inspired when you're in the same kind of environments. And that's what we're really realizing during this lockdown. How are you doing when it comes to that and the burnout aspect of just being in the same space, the same kind of mind state?
You know what? One thing is we've been blessed. We have a couple clients. We did a pivot with tab menu. So even though we were catering to like a dine-in experience, now we're actually helping restaurant, get on their feet by opening up our technology and offering, our tech. So basically a digital menu be embedded on their website. So customers can go on their website, order from the menu for takeout or for their in-house delivery. Because delivery fees from like Uber, DoorDash, it's like 20 to 30%, right? Of a very slim margin from a restaurant. So they're already not doing well, plus another 20 to 30%, that's extremely bad for them. So we're like, hey, you know what? Our technology is very scalable, right? It's very digital. It's very lightweight in the sense that we can open it up and afford like have it implemented on your own website. You host it, but customers can come in, they can make the order, and I want it delivered, or I want to pick it up, and you do it, and you do that yourself, right? We have that. We have Educare, and it's been blessed that we've been busy, and I try to change it up, working from inside my office, sometime outside when the weather is nice. But I have two kids, right? The hardest thing is trying to get work in while they're sleeping or while they're playing, but I have to allocate time with them as well too. So they've been keeping me busy, and you've been keeping me sane. So I think it's been a balance. It's nice.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I'm I'm secretly super happy about from after hearing with you is not having to deal with kids during the time when there's no babysitting and there's no school to drop them off for. How's being surrounded by your kids all the time been? Like I know it's been like a blessing in disguise because you can spend more time with them, but at the same time, like as a parent, you need break, man.
Honestly, it's been tough. It's been tough trying to work, and especially when there's just so much things. It's like if you feel like for me, if I miss a quarter of the day, half the day, it feels like I've missed a week because there's so much thing going on. But my wife Sharon, I mean, she's great. Like she's so good with the kids that they don't demand a lot of my time, so I can like focus on my work, right? And I have like scheduled like time blocks throughout the day that I spend time with them,
Mm.
right? But you
Yeah.
know, honestly, one of the greatest thing about um, the silver lining with the quarantine is when we have conference call meetings like this, you know, when we're talking about kids, everybody's going through the same issue, right? This is what makes us human. Before it was like, you know, you're meeting somebody new, you go to their office, you shake their hand, you talk about business, maybe catch in a small talk in between, but that's it. That's
Mm.
it, right? You don't really get to connect like who's across the table from you. But what I have realized, you know, through all this and especially having kids is we have common issues. And a lot of the times we talk about the same thing. And I was talking to a client like, you know, several weeks ago, and she has two girls, and her girls are like 12 and 10, something, you know, around that age. And we started talking, and she heard her girls, you know, very loudly on the second floor playing, and she's like, "Oh yeah, it's fine." I'm like, "Are you sure? You might want to, you know, take a look at what's going on." She's like, "No, they're fine." 2 minutes in, she's like, "Henry, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to put a pause because I think one of the girls is gonna kill the other one." I'm like, "Go right ahead, right?
Mm.
Please. I have two kids too. I fully understand." And then after that conversation, literally, we had like a sidebar, like 20 minutes, just talk about parenting. Like, you know, how are you dealing with it? What are you doing, right? So I think that's great. It's great that we're sharing these kind of like very human
Yeah.
conversation and discussions.
Yeah, I think you got that there where like these kind of like having to converse like this, like we hear about like the Zoom fatigue and like the the inhuman element of not being able to meet people to in face to face and read their body movements, but it's kind of melting people's barriers, right? Like when you are meeting someone professionally versus personally, like you put up a different kind of persona, the way you
Mhm.
carry yourself, how you communicate, the words you use. But since we're in these environments where, especially as a parent, you're basically taking care of your kids, you're at home, you're also cooking for your spouse, and you're taking care of a bunch of other things during the day. Work and life is integrated rather than balanced. You're kind of forced to share these kind of moments, and that breaks down those barriers you put up.
Mhm.
I think we've experienced this a lot talking to a lot of clients. Like it's much easier to form a more personal relationship, to have more understanding of like the other person through these like video calls and through this time, because we're all united by this shared alien experience.
Yeah, we have one common enemy, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Yeah, and like the relationship that you make, it's much more meaningful, I feel like, right? Like you don't know how many times where I end the calls like from talking to, you know, somebody, either a client or just anybody that like a stranger, and it ended with like, "Hey, you know, when this is done, let's grab a drink together."
yeah,
Right? Before COVID-19, like you can get that, right? But sometimes it would take a little bit more effort to get that out of someone. Now it's like, you know, you have a call, you talk about business, and then you talk about like, hey, you know, how you're dealing with the quarantine right now, and you get into a whole midst of it. I was talking to a potential client, and we ended up talking about meditation. She's like,
hmm
I'm a yoga instructor and been teaching meditation for 15 years. And then we started talking for like another half an hour past our, time block for talking about new business.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting the way we're connecting and changing, right? Like, but I mean, during this time, what are you doing to like keep learning on your toes? Like, let's treat this like a time capsule, right? Like 5 years from now, 10 years back from now, we look back at this and try to think about our mind state. What channels are you using to learn right now? Are you reading, podcasting, audiobooks, right? YouTube, doing courses? What are you doing right now?
I'm very happy to say that I'm a Harvard, enrolled in Harvard courses. I have to, man. So it's funny because before COVID-19, like you know me, I really like structures, planning, schedules, right?
Mhm.
So I every day I wake up, I do journaling, right? I write
Mhm.
about 20 minutes to 25 minutes of journaling. I give myself a quote that anchors me throughout the day, whatever inspirational quotes from anywhere, right? That just anchors me, like this is what it's about. And I read about. Have you heard of uh, it's a Chinese thing. It's called the Way, right?
Yeah,
There,
yeah, yeah.
right. It's a book that talks about, like there's like 80 something chapters, I think 90 chapters, and it's just snippets of, like what is the flow state, like what is the way, like what is things that should be, right? A very meditative, very peaceful mindset. So I've been trying to work on that.
Yo, that sounds super interesting. I'd love to know more.
Yeah, yeah, I'll send you the link. So basically, it was back in ancient China where there is a scholar that wrote this, like that scrolls these books with different chapters of, like what life should be, right? Like it's called the Way. And with these chapters, the person that translated this into English, it has the direct translation and has commentary. So it gives you, like what is written in Chinese translated in English, and he gives his commentary, like how I feel about this, and what it really means to me. So I think it's
Yeah,
a great thing. It's a great way to learn.
yeah.
Yeah. How about
So
yourself? Have you been reading?
yeah, I've been trying so hard to get into reading. Like I like reading, right? Like I enjoy it, but like getting into the mind state of like putting away time to sit down and read is so hard with so many things happening right now. So I've really been depending a lot on like podcasts and audiobooks. Well, not
Hmm.
even audiobooks so much, more on podcasts. I'm really enjoying that medium of being like information coming through because I like background noise anyways. There's very rarely a time in my day where I'm not listening to something, you know? Like I just like when you're walking around the house, when you're walking around, I just have something playing on with my earphones or on the phone, you know? So I just did this on Maria Wells podcast, right? The
Oh
Young
yeah.
Millennials podcast. She asked me, she's like, "Yo, what's your top 5 podcasts?" And without like I was surprised myself, like without like missing a beat, I knew exactly what to say. Top 5 podcasts: Rogan, the AI podcast with Lex Friedman, um, Jacko Willings, the podcast because he's just on being a
He's a
general badass,
beast.
the beast, right?
Yeah. The
Um,
4 a.m. ritual.
Absolutely. Right. Those are the main 3 podcasts, but also, How I Built This, Guy Raz, right? That's that I guess I jump back onto it right now. It's so good. And the fifth one would be, it's not a podcast, Kings and Generals on YouTube.
Oh yeah, the YouTube. Yeah.
I've been so obsessed with that. I've been sending you links, right, on like how they use game mechanics to not like from like actual like games to show history, right? Like in depth historical battles to like how lands were conquered and kingdoms and empires were made. It's so I love studying that a lot because there's repetitive patterns in history, right? Like the way humans form groups, like there are patterns that emerge within that. And if you can see patterns emerging and ebbing, like I feel like you can make predictive plays for the future.
Hmm. Right. I mean, history repeats itself, right?
Yeah. So let's end off on this note, right? Like 10 years from now, right? What would you like to be doing? What is the future you want to be seeing?
Oh, 10 years from now, what would the future I like be seeing? That's a tough one, man. And I say that it's tough because things are changing so rapidly and every day is different. But I think it's going to be more technology augmentation, right? Technology playing a large part of integrating with our everyday lives more so now. And the like some of the key things that we talked about, right? Social tech is going to be huge. The way we conduct ourselves, the way that we do business is going to change completely. And like, I'm not even talking about like 10 years, like even a year from now, a couple months from now, it's already happening. It's already changing. COVID-19 was just the catalyst, right? If you have asked me like, if COVID-19 wasn't in the picture and you have asked me that question, I can tell you like that was it. But maybe that shortened that life cycle like to a year, 2 years, right? Health tech is going to be, the landscape of health tech is going to be completely different. Food tech, again, we already talked about with Tap Menu, is going to be hugely different than what we used to see now. But it's just technology will play, such an immense part in our life. How about you, 10 years from now?
Yeah, sorry, give me one. As you know, my studio is in my living room, and when people come home, they literally walk through the studio.
Work-life integration.
Work-life integration. But yeah, like there's two trends that I've been following, right? That I feel like I'm hitting in the next decade. The first trend is I think it's gonna hit in the next 4 to 5 years, is biotechnology, right? CRISPR is something I've been following a lot. CRISPR is like a super cheap way of manipulating genes and genetic modifications. Like right now, in 2020, it costs about less than $200. You can buy a CRISPR kit at home, do genetic manipulation.
Wow. Okay. Less than $200.
Less than $200, you can get a kit, like a starter kit, and start getting into the basics of like genetic manipulation, right? If you really want to, you can grab like more lab equipment and literally out of your house start doing genetic engineering. Like it's pretty crazy environment. But the cost of genetic manipulation in the next 4 years, following Moore's law, how things become cheaper over time. The cost is going to go down to like $75, $50, $40 for a kit to get started into this. Like it's gonna become pennies eventually to do like high level laboratory kind of work, especially in genomics and bioengineering. So I feel like there's a big movement towards like bioengineering, and biotechnology is becoming like a new industry, just like software and technology has become like a technology industry. So the ability to manipulate, just like the ability to manipulate information through the internet exists. I think the transhuman movement, the ability to manipulate your own genes, the ability to pay to have upgrades for yourself, for your pets, for your children is going to become a thing. The ability to get like superfoods that are going to have super nutrients for you is going to become a thing. Like I feel like that's a new industry. It's gonna well up in the next 4 or 5 years.
So you're just gonna pop a pill and you have everything that you need.
Well, not a pill, but like, you know what I mean? Like I'm not sure exactly what the biomedical industry is gonna look like, but it's gonna become a thing just because of the cost for production is gonna go down, and so that's there, right? But again, we don't know what's going to happen even if the cost of production goes down. Look at like VR and AR. This is the 7th time VR, AR as an industry has bounced up in an upwards trend, right? 7th time in about 50, 60 years. Like in the 70s, there was a time where people were selling, having a desktop PC strapped to your back with these huge goggles that showed big shapes on the goggles, like nothing like high definition right now. I'm saying this is the future of computing. This is VR.
What? Strapped to the back, man. Like these guys are wheeling like a 60-pound,
40-pound, 50-pound system they're wearing as a backpack with a VR goggles, saying this is the future.
That's awesome.
In the 70s, they were trying to sell this as like a consumer good.
Yeah.
So VR and AR, that's been like the biggest flop, right, of the past few years, is like, oh, it's going to be an industry, how many people really have an Oculus? How many people really have a Samsung VR, right? Very few. And even then, it's like very basic games are involved in there. So like, yeah, as the economies of scale can happen, as technology gets cheaper and things like that, new industries do kind of boom, but not necessarily jump the shark and like get somewhere where they can become like a viable commodity.
Right.
So I'm interested in seeing what happens in biotechnology, especially as research ability to research and make improvements gets cheaper, and seeing if the industry that was promised actually booms out of it.
Interesting.
Yeah. But on top of that, for sure, the next decade is going to begin the space race, right? Like we're talking about this earlier on, like
2030.
2030. Like Canada's looking to open up space, like space mining. India actually has this week made announcements where they're doing public-private investments into the privatization of space exploration. They're already starting during
Wait,
this time.
India?
India is starting a private enterprise into space, especially now that they've launched their own rockets, and they have like their own lunar rockets that they've launched out. Their space industry becoming more emboldened, and they're looking to expand that. China's trying to go to the dark side of the moon, right? America and their sphere of influence is commercializing. Russia is losing a lot of money to SpaceX and all these private industries from commercial and government resources being shifted away from their space industry. They're the top in the world. If you want to go into space to refill ISS or anything like that, Russia is a go-to place through Kazakhstan and all these places, right? Using this Russian space agency. But now, nation states are building up private agencies who's gonna now take us to the stars, right? So that's gonna be really interesting, because the final frontier is gonna become a frontier in our lifetime.
Yeah, when you showed me that, that article and that website, I was just at awe because, space exploration did not even cross my mind one bit. Like, how much is it to like send like a group of, let's say, 4 people into space right now currently? Is there a number?
Yes,
Are we in the hundreds of?
the average trip to space right now costs about $63 million, right? Like a manned space, and that's just to get to the ISS. That's like high Earth orbit. It's not even like leaving Earth's gravity well, right? So getting to the moon will be astronomical cost at this point, mostly because of how the space industry and aeronautics industry works, right? The cost is so high. And even then, like, I think the cost per kilogram is about $4,300 per kilogram to send something into space. So again,
so
like
for
now,
like a decade from now, like 2030, they're expecting the cost to come like way down where it's actually viable. Because I know SpaceX, right? Like Elon Musk, he's like, well, we're spending we're sending the rockets, and we have this huge piece of the rocket that's get detached from the main part, right? And it, traditionally it's garbage. He's like, how do
yeah,
we reuse this, right? With SpaceX. So he's actually reduced the cost of space exploration, or like sending rockets into space, tremendously. So that cost is going to come down in the next decade.
yeah. So like what I'm thinking is that there's gonna be a lot of infrastructure going to be built out. So SpaceX, what they're trying to do is bring down the cost per production, and the unit economics to go to space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their main value metric is how do we bring down the cost per kilogram being sent to space? So the average mission, whether it be commercial or a manned mission or whatever, becomes cheap as possible. We're trying to bring the cost of that down. Blue Horizon, Jeff Bezos, they're trying to build infrastructure. How do we send stuff, not even into space, but high orbit, right? They want to create the postal service of space, right? Virgin Galactic, they're trying to create. Yeah, that's exact words from Jeff Bezos, right? So, and then there's Virgin Galactic, right? From Virgin Group, Richard Branson. They're trying to get space tourism. How to get people excited about space, just even going up there and spending money towards it. So he's trying to get people to spend money for thrills, for entertainment, to go to space or near space orbit, to get money to, again, decrease the cost for production, and you bring down the unit economics by bringing more money into the industry. So there's three realms right now currently being invested into, but there's a whole, and that's the most public ones, right? There's a whole bunch of non-public ventures in the back end. How to provide food at a better rate in space, how to shift things around it better in space, the better alloys and better materials to use for space, and so less wear and tear happens.
What about fueling stations?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is going to be these fueling stations, right? When they have, just like they're gonna separate the different trajectories. So they need a spaceport in space, right? So one stage is getting to this high Earth orbit. It could be the ISS, or it could be a private enterprise, but somebody having like a high altitude spaceport. So the first cost is going up to there. Once you're there, it becomes cheaper to like transition to like into actual space, right? So I think what's going to happen is like the infrastructure is going to be built first, and whoever builds and owns infrastructure is going to be very lucrative, because that's going to be the basis point for all future travel outwards, right? And we know there's billions of dollars worth of minerals out there.
I thought we're in the trillions, in the big T's.
Trillions. Yeah, if you look at the solar system in general, right? I mean, it's a final frontier for a reason. Once we get into the solar system, like it's gonna be like the amount of resources we're gonna have access to is gonna be multiples more than that's been on Earth, right? Like there's one asteroid up there that has more gold on it than that's ever been mined out of the Earth. How did that change us? What did that do to our economies? What did that do to pricing? If a private enterprise lands on a rock that has more precious metals than ever been mined out of Earth, plants a flag and says, "This is ours. We have all future mineral rights," and then their stock starts reflecting that and shoots up, and they become a multi-trillion-dollar company.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do for our ecosystem? What does that do to our economy? What does that do to how we conduct business? Right? Like when it wasn't Mike Pence. It was like a senator in the United States when the United States Senate signed a law to allow for more private enterprise to go into space. He's like the final word of the Senate House by the senator, I think, who said it, was the first trillionaire is going to be made in space. Like trillionaire, not even a $1 trillion company. The first person is going to be worth over $1 trillion.
Personal net worth.
Personal net worth. Like, what does that do to inequality? What does that do to the like the ability, like the economy between the rich and the haves and the have-nots?
Right. So they're not going to be the top 1%. They're going to be the top 0.00101%.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. That's very interesting. But, I'm going to keep my eyes open for space exploration. I think is very interesting. And if it's possible for space explorations in the next decade, in our lifetime, we're in the 40s, I think we should do it.
Yeah, I mean, not exploration, but definitely as a private enterprise, right? Like what I think about is like it being like the merchants who invested in the East British Trading Company, or like the Netherlands, like the Dutch East India Trading Company, right? These companies were funded by private investors. Like when the first corporations came to be, the Dutch East India Trading Company was the first corporation ever made, right? And it was worth, in nowadays money, I think it was worth $4 trillion at its peak, right? Like we think about Amazon, we think about we think about Jeff Bezos, Amazon, we think about Facebook, we think about Apple and Google, these trillion-dollar companies. But all four of them, like the first corporation, the Dutch East India Trading Company, was worth more than all four of them combined. Right? So when corporations were first developed, what they did was diversify risk, right? So what I'm interested in is, as the space race happens and the potential to get revenue, the potential to get profits is there, can there be a new type of way to organize people and to diversify risk come up? You know, like a true decentralized movement where, because it's going to require a lot of capital to run a proper space mining operation. Where can that capital come from? You know, how would the new ways of technology and structuring people together and capital flows, where it's more robotic and more AI operated capital flows are running at a time, how can they be structured together to fluctuate capital towards these enterprises? You know?
Right. Would there be a time where all the nations, you know, come together and form one entity, you know, from Earth, setting this entity up and mine the mineral in space?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be a colonial nightmare. I think it's going to be like countries and spheres of influence, you know, using their private enterprises as instruments to colonize space. It's going to be a land grab. You know, it's going to be a gold rush / land grab, because literally international treaty as it is right now is whoever can land on a place and stake a claim can make the mineral wealth theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So just like back in the days, like European colonists, you know, land in a space, plant a flag, like this is Spain, this is France, this is Netherlands, like split up the world. You know, just like that kind of idea. Wherever India's companies goes and plant a flag, say this is India's, this is, you know, Tata mining companies. You know,
Tata's all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Right? Like, you know, this is Tata Group's rock, and like, you know, like they end up claiming like a cluster to themselves. And next door is like China's mining company comes in and stakes a claim. And there's gonna be points where they rub, you know, there's mineral claims that's gonna be, you know, contested, and that's gonna be the next friction point for geopolitics, right? Just like oil exploration, where companies fight over, you know, oil fields and who has rights to it.
Mm-hmm.
Space is a no man's land.
It really is.
Right? So I think that's going to be super interesting, and it's going to be very interesting to watch it develop. But anyways, let's, I'm just looking forward to like post COVID-19. You know, what does that look like too?
You know what? I think we're going to have more to talk about in the next 25th episode. This is the 75th, and we're going to chat more in the 100th episode to see what has passed.
Honestly, like we're going to hit that 100 in the next 3 months easily.
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 The way we're going. Yeah.
Definitely. But Henry, man, this has been great. I think this is the time to call it.
All right, man.
Cheers.
Ravi. Cheers, buddy.
To space.
To space. And BLUMEx. And Tab Menu.
And BLUMEx. And Tab Menu. All right, guys. Whoever's watching, thanks for watching. The 75th episode. Feels great. It's been a blessing. To 100 more. To 1,000 more.
And 1,000 more after that. Cheers.
Cheers, man. See you guys.